everyone. This is Ryan. This is After Dark. We are really stoked. We got kind of a small one tonight, which is actually probably pretty good. But we have someone who is very important to me as a guest tonight. He's a musician, not only of his own music, but also does a lot of commercial work. He's an author, and he also has a TikTok account that goes through music history and really uncovers some really crazy stuff that I think we would all enjoy hearing. His name is Mark Mallman. I'm going to pull him up first. Hello, Mr. Mallman.
Hi.
Hello. We have Mark from Scythe Guitars. We have
What's up, y'all?
Sean from Scythe Guitars, giving a big yawn, starting it out right.
Oh yeah, sorry,
And
I just woke up.
And then we have Charles from Silktone. How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing killer. I just ate the
Good.
first crunch wrap I've had in a long time.
You had a crunch wrap?
Nice.
Dude, I never get those. And tonight I was like, fuck it, crunch wrap.
Do it.
Oh yeah.
Even like the thing that kills me about the crunch wrap is the kind of like the lettuce in it. You know, like I just kind of like I want just all unhealthy shit if I'm gonna eat Taco Bell.
What do you get without lettuce in it?
Chili
Chilito,
cheese
bro.
burrito,
Chili
which
cheese
you
burrito.
don't have in California.
Yeah.
Cheesy bean and rice burrito.
Dude,
doesn't
I-
have it.
I've been missing it ever since then. I'm like, fuck, I got to figure out something to do.
Mama, did you
We
know?
looked it up on chewycheese.org. It's an hour away from you in like Roseburg or some shit like that.
An hour?
I-
Shit. That
I
might
don't
be a good afternoon.
Mama, you know you've toured the country more times than you can count. Did you know that the chili cheese burrito is only in specific Taco Bells?
That I didn't know that.
And there's a website that tracks it as far as which Taco Bell carries the chili cheese burrito.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful to know. I definitely I'm like a Del Taco guy for sure.
Yeah.
But like even though I did a Taco John's commercial, I do kind of like I do groove on the cheese roll up. It's called now, right?
Oh yeah.
It used to
It's
be
just-
called a cheese-a-rito.
Yeah.
That's my jam.
And
Yeah.
you did do a Taco John's commercial. I remember
did.
that.
I did do a Taco John's commercial, and that's a regional kind of deal. They don't think they have that on the West Coast. So
But you guys in Kansas City have Taco John's, right?
Yeah, I like the potato LA
Yeah.
and
Can't
just the basic old bean burrito, man. That's my Taco John's go-tos. And the crunchy tacos are good too.
Not.
I don't know what
not-
Taco John's is.
it's
That's-
Sucks.
It's a taco that picks up hookers.
Oh my goodness.
Sounds
That's
about right.
great.
I'm back.
You're back.
Welcome back. Happy to be here
Yeah.
again, guys.
You guys had the reason you weren't here last week was because you were rehearsing for a record release show,
Mhm.
and you guys did
Mhm.
that record release show.
Yeah.
How'd it go? Was it fine?
This
Oh,
is
it's
great.
great.
We packed the place out. We only had one major malfunction in our light show, so all
That's
things
right.
good.
It looked
Yeah.
rad on the photo. Is that the most packed show you guys have played, or have you played more packed shows than that?
With this band, yeah,
Oh, cool. Because yeah, it looked like a good turnout.
yeah,
That's right.
yeah. It was about 225 people.
Fuck yeah.
Nice.
Yeah,
Very
Nice job.
good.
nice job.
So this is something that we were talking about before we got on air that I think is it was shocking to me the first time that I got to experience it, but I play live with Mr. Mallman, at least locally. When he tours, it's just him and a drummer. But when I went in to go track on a record at your studio, Mark, you know, you're like, yeah, I got this Line 6 Spider that you can plug into if you'd like to. And I was like, oh, well, I'm going to bring something else.
Yeah. And glad you did.
What I learned through that process was that you have where we're all a bunch of gear snobs, you find the thing that works, you don't care what it is. And I think we could start with maybe like your DAW.
So I I started like everybody else. I started in a basement on a 4-track when I was 11 or whatever. And when I went to college, I went to Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and I was using Pro Tools 2, and eventually I was doing some TA work there on Pro Tools 2. I moved to Seattle, and I was just about going to do some Pro Tools stuff, and I was at Ryan, what's the guy's name from Hogan's Heroes? Crane. And I'm specific about this because there's a Crane.
Is it
What'd you say?
Larry Crane?
What'd you say?
No, that's somebody else.
Larry Crane?
Yeah. Well, no, I think Larry Crane is the
The synth guy.
yeah,
Bob Crane?
maybe.
The son of Bob Crane owns this great studio out there. It's where Sunny Day Real Estate recorded. And my friend who designed Pachyderm here was out there with Mark Walk, and he was producing a record for Ogre of Skinny Puppy. This was in the 90s. And I sat down with the owner of the studio, and because I was thinking about interning there, I was living in Seattle. And he said at this time, he said, look, Mark, you can really only be an artist or an engineer because there's just not enough time to be great at both. And at that time, it was different than now where you kind of do everything. Obviously, there wasn't computers Pro Tools 2, it was like, it's very new.
Yeah.
You could get a job just removing clicks.
Yeah.
And so I kind of was like, okay, I'm going to be an artist, I'm going to be an artist, and I'm going to just kind of forego the engineering thing. But I'm going to parallel that with this thing. When I write songs, I use a notebook and a pen, a really crappy notebook and a crappy pen. I find that when I was a kid, I would go out and I would spend like $3 on a nice notebook with a plastic cover, and a nice expensive pen. And I was too uptight about it. I couldn't be creative. I just couldn't do it. And that has carried through to my whole career. I'm a composer. And so when you're a composer, you kind of have to be an engineer second. And I've always found in creative scenarios that I get red light fever when I'm in a studio. If I have to record, like I was working on a Nike thing one time, and I had to do a quartet. So I scored a piece for a quartet and we recorded it. But for the most part, we didn't get the spot. But that's a really annoying different story. But for the most part, I don't like to work in a nice place. I don't like to work with nice gear because it prohibits me creatively. I can't think of good ideas because I'm too precious with it. I used to have a 73 Gibson that belonged to Joey Mallman from Badfinger. I didn't buy it from him. I bought it from a store, but it was his before me. And I played it through this. I think it was a 65 Fender Deluxe. Did they make Deluxe in 65? It was a pre-silver face, black face.
Yeah, they sure as hell did.
So I had that combo.
Yeah.
It
was the dream, right?
It was sick sounding.
Literally the dream.
I couldn't take it live. I just was, and I sold it. I got rid of it because I couldn't do anything with it. So my DAW, I had a computer that made for me that runs XP, and it's a 24-bit card in there. I can't show it to you because I'd have to turn this. I'm on a fixed camera, and I run for most of what I do. I'm using what I found to be the best version of Acid 4.0, and I use Sony SoundForge with the Waves bundle. So I'm basically running like it's 2004. I think 2004 in this studio, 2003, 2004. And I have Pro Tools and I have Logic that I'll use. Back in the early 2010s, it was still important to have like the Pro Tools session. And when I was working, I did a B zombie movie for Lionsgate, and they wanted the Pro Tools. They wanted sessions, but eventually they just wanted stems. It didn't matter. So I'm recording now mostly on this 24-bit XP DAW.
Nice.
I was just
fine.
talking about that. I was just talking about that with someone. It might have been here last week. I don't remember, but just about how limitation in your gear or your equipment kind of spurs creativity because you're working within the confines of what you have and can use, rather than going, oh, I would finish this song if I had this better guitar or whatever, But
I know.
Writing a whole album on a fucking Casio tone or something, it's going to be a creative album.
There was a movie called The Hitcher, and it was a remake of The Hitcher. It was with Sophia Bush. It came out in like 2005 or something. And I was working for Trailer Park, and they had me do the trailer, and they wanted this sound. And I had a Casio keyboard, and I tried different sounds. I tried sound design. I tried sample libraries. At that time, had one sample library because they were expensive, a CD sample library. And I did just that. What ended up being, I saw it in the movie theater, a portion of the trailer for The Hitcher was a Casio sound reversed, And I remember one time reading a Brian Eno interview from the 80s where the Roland D50 was coming out, the Korg M1 was coming out, and the question was, Brian, what do you think about these these computers that can make anything? And he said, I'm not as creative when there aren't limitations. When there are limitations, I'm more creative. For me, it's not the limitations, it's the preciousness of nice gear. I just can't think of good ideas. My ideas are better when I don't have to worry about something breaking, I buy a lot of, go ahead.
My wife isn't here, which is good because she's tired of hearing this story. But I was reading about a scientific study about options, and they took a group and brought them to an ice cream parlor that had a bajillion options for flavors, and then they took a separate group and brought them to a parlor that had like strawberry, vanilla, chocolate, and maybe one other, mint. And they pulled them all on their way out, and they found that the folks who went to the place that had 4 options were far more secure and happy with their decision than the people who went to the place that had 50 flavors that they could choose from.
Mm-hmm.
And I have taken that into the music world as well, especially when you're talking about piling up gear, and you're talking about building these massive pedal boards, and you're talking about all these racks of gear and stuff like that. And I'm like, maybe that isn't the thing that makes you feel most satisfied. Maybe the thing that makes you feel most satisfied is taking your 30-year-old tube screamer and using it in several different ways. Holy shit, he's here.
There he is.
All right.
I think, Ryan, when you said 4 ice creams, it made me think of something we were talking about before we went on. I kind of have this theory that there are only 4 synth sounds, and it doesn't apply to the studio. In the studio, I spend a long time making my own sounds, whether it's with my Moog or whether it's on a soft synth. But live, I've always felt like I'm going to go in mono, and there's basically there's a saw sound, there's a square waveform, there's a pad, and then maybe like a chorused out brassy solo synth. And after that, you're playing in a club, there's a bunch of noise from the audience, there's a bunch of noise from the band. Like, you can't really tell that much of difference. I don't think complicated synth sounds work good over a live rock band. I just think they muddy things up. They can't communicate clear. It's like trying to read Shakespeare in a bar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I do think limitations can communicate more concisely.
Sure. I would like to just point out that this is the first time that Kierkegaard has showed up in the comment section. Thank you for that. That's amazing. But yeah, and like you make the most of everything that you own. Is what and you also beat the living shit out of everything that you own. Mallman is something that I've noticed.
Yeah.
I mean, just in the time that I've played with you, I think you've had 2 keyboards.
Yeah, 2 or 3. I go through the pianos. I used to play a Wurlitzer live, and the guy that repaired it would just get so mad. And I get it, I just I think that we shouldn't let our gear be the boss of us. We shouldn't let gear control us. We shouldn't let material things control us. And so I think from a performance standpoint, it's important for me to show that it's fine if a synthesizer falls on the ground.
Or you're standing on it.
Yeah, I really love my new Moog, so I probably wouldn't do that. But I have ruined some really beautiful synths, and I kind of regret it. I think the biggest is a Korg DT 770. DTs, no, those are headphones. Anyways, doesn't matter. Korg 770 monophonic. But anyways, I just think it's just material things,
Yeah. By the way, so when the pandemic happened, it's still happening, but when we all went into lockdown, a lot of people, I think, a lot of musician friends that I had were really, really itching to get back to playing live music. And I really kind of wanted to I was not as interested in getting back out there and doing it again. I really wanted to kind of pare down to the things that I thought made me happiest.
And also doing this podcast.
Which came several years later, but still. So the only musician who I still play live with is Mark. And it's always you never know what you're going to get at a Mallman show. And I had seen several Mallman shows prior to being on stage. But I've seen you ride mini bikes on stage. I've seen you being hoisted up into the air on stage. I've seen you do all kinds of really, really incredible stuff. And it was one of the biggest learning processes that I had. And you coached me in real time on stage.
Yeah.
Was that the performance is extremely important. The performance is more important than whether you played in perfectly or every note the right way that you should. It's about, it is about the experience of the live show.
I had this really profound experience on the road recently. Thank you for saying that. I just want to say I'm learning all the time too, and I went out playing bass. I toured on bass with Vision Video, which is a goth band fronted by a really amazing person named Dustin, and he goes by Goth Dad on TikTok. But Dustin was in Afghanistan, and then he was a firefighter for 5 years. He's coming from this place, and then he started his band. He's coming from this place that most musicians don't come from, which is like real life, where there's life and death scenarios every single day. For like 10 years, he's facing life and death scenarios. So we get on stage, and I think we were in Dallas or something. We were playing with Rose Garden Funeral Party at Trees, and it was packed, 500 people in there, whatever. And I played one or two wrong notes. And, you know, with my own show, I don't care about wrong notes, but when I'm backing somebody up, I want what I demand out of a musician. So I get off stage and I say, hey, you know, Dustin, I'm sorry for screwing up on that one tune. And he looked at me and he said, oh, it's fine. You know, whenever I make a mistake on stage, I remember at least I'm not being shot at.
Ooh.
And I was like, wow. Being with him on the road was such an enriching experience, to be with someone who'd been in wars and who is incredibly liberal and anti-war, but who had been on the front lines, who had been in COVID saving lives. Like, this person saved lives and knows how to shoot, and is just like coming from this like superhero world and then playing exquisite guitar. Like, just, he's great. And but hearing him say that, I was like, oh wow, yeah, music doesn't really mean anything. Mistake doesn't really matter, you know.
Yeah.
But I guess for me, I feel like if you're, as a band leader, I read once about Martin Scorsese where it's like, I get the best people I can and let them do what they do. And as a band leader, a musician's not going to play that good if they're not feeling it, if they're not happy, you know.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to get mad at someone. You just don't hire him again.
Fair enough.
But you just are like, okay, that's fine, just express yourself, you know. I remember the one thing though, when you played with me, you were doing a solo and it was great, but then I was like, no pentatonic solos, never.
Yep.
Just play chromatic, because as soon as the guitar solo, when a guitar solo becomes too bluesy, you turn into a bowling alley band. And we're no offense to bowling alley bands, but we're already walking that line between classic rock tribute and classic rock parody. And I think that when you can play more like Sterling Morrison, it's more artful, you know. There's a lot of room for what people say wrong notes.
I want to go see the Goth Songbook.
The Goth Songbook was really, really fun.
That was interesting.
I'd see that show.
It
was really fun.
We learned a lot by learning all about goth music, and I had learned it on that tour. I'm a fan, but what I learned on that tour was, you're just playing, the bass line is on the low string and it's just 4 notes repeating eighth notes, and it's awesome. And I realized, oh, my bass lines are too complicated.
Yeah.
The best advice I ever got from a producer was like, get dumb, especially when it comes to bass. He was like, our bassist was like, you know, everything, we'd come up with a riff and he's super, super talented bassist, and he played like the most complex shit. And we were like, that sounds awesome, but like always felt like something's missing, but we were like, but this is cool. Like, we're like all music guys, so we're like, this is sick. And then the producer comes in and he's like, okay, so now you're just gonna do fucking quarter notes. And he was like, what? I'm so much better than that. And I was like, no, this fucking makes sense. Like, that's
right. There's a reason why Crazy Horse sounds so good.
Right.
Neil Young's Crazy Horse sounds so good because it's simple, you know. And what's hard to do is to unlearn. I read this quote from the painter Paul Klee. He's a naive artist. Maybe you know of him from the first half of the 20th century. And he said something to the effect of, we spend the first 5 years of our life trying to figure it out, and the rest of our life trying to get back to where we were before we learned it. And it's really hard to, you know, people will say, oh, Mark, you know, where should I go for voice lessons? And I'm like, don't. Once you get theater voice, you can't un-theater voice, you know. It's harder, I think, when you learn theory to. I've always wanted to write a song with nonsense lyrics, and it just, my ego won't let me do it.
I had a teacher that said, if you want to think outside the box, you have to learn what's inside of it first. And I was like, you're bullshit. But I don't know. Like, it sounds smart, it sounds profound, but when you think about it, like, yeah, like you said, that seems way harder to do. If you learn to be technical and to be correct, I feel like it would be harder to be creatively sloppy on purpose. You know what I mean?
it's a double-edged thing, you know, because you love music, you want to learn more and more and more and more about music, and then once you learn a lot, it's hard to unlearn it. Somebody came to me once and they're like, "Oh, I don't know about our new bassist. I don't know if I like our new bassist." And I said, "Oh yeah, why is that?" And he's like, "You know, they don't have any experience, any theory, and they're playing all these wrong notes." And I was like, that's the only thing that's making your band different from any other band is what that person has right now. I feel like Peter Hook from Joy Division was tapped into that idea of like musically, if you're like a skilled music theorist and you hear Joy Division, everything is wrong.
Yeah.
Everything. Like the
I
drums,
can
the
attest to
times,
that.
the
Yeah.
singing is off, the timing is out of key, the bass is playing these weird chromatic notes, wrong scales, bass player and the guitars are playing in different scales.
But it sounds fucking rad.
It sounds so good.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we step on our own feet by making perfect stuff. It's hard.
I like the I have I don't know, like I feel like it's a fear of, for me speaking personally, like it's a fear of that sort of like rigidity, but it and like having to get to a point, if you're going to learn what's in the box and then learn how to think outside the box, it's like it requires so much work and dedication to like get to that point that it's almost, you're almost like, I'll just try the shortcut, which is not knowing what I'm doing really in any meaningful way, and then like I'll stumble upon stuff that sounds cool, which is, you know, oftentimes if you ask like someone like, why is this chord progression this way, and they're like not like perfectly fluent in, you know, music theory, and maybe even if they are, they might just be like, I don't know, that's just kind of, this is kind of what I did.
I mean,
Right.
it goes like, yeah, that makes sense. And then
that's like what you want to go for. But I do think that like for me, having like theory as, or whatever theory I know, I don't know. I know what I don't know, and I don't know a lot, but whatever I do know, like it's like, oh, that's like a useful trick. If I like have like a chord progression and I'm like, I want something that sounds interesting, but I don't like, I need to like reach into like a toolbox and I start like fucking around with something and like, oh, that idea sounds cool. So like instead of playing like, you know, instead of playing something that's like, you know, in like a major chord that's in the key, I'll like take like, you know, the C major chord and I'll be like, how about the minor version of that? And then I'm playing and I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of rad, right? Which is like something that, you know, that's like a thing, that's like that's a technique in music theory and composition. But it's just like adapting theory and turning it from like a big bad, like scary, daunting, like this is how it has to be, to just like, oh, here's like a bag of tricks that I can use, and if I like it, great, and if I don't, whatever. Like I'll just keep fucking around.
So
well, it's a lot like designing circuits and stuff. I talked to you guys through the design of like the Overdrive Plus and everything, and you guys know that I'm not a huge Overdrive fan. Like, so I didn't have a bunch of favorite Overdrives in mind that I was like pulling from. I was just kind of going in fresh, not knowing really what was so special about all these Overdrives, and came up with something. Like you mentioned, where you just kind of fall into an idea and go, oh fuck, that sounds cool, and you lean into it, you know. And yeah, it just it's interesting how that can apply to kind of any kind of creative process.
Yeah,
I mean,
you know, your first class of you know, intro to music theory, when you take it in music school, your professor should stand up and say this phrase that is so common, which is learn your theory and then forget it. And what that is so hard to do, and I feel like it's a red pill, blue pill moment right there, where it's kind of like you can either get trapped in this shit, which so many of us are going to do. And still to this day, I mean, Mallman all the time is like, play the wrong notes. Just play the wrong notes.
Yeah, because it's only wrong now. I mean, if you look at the blue note, the blue note was wrong at one time. And now that single chromatic step redefined all 20th century music. It's not so prominent now anymore. Right. Shakespeare invented his own words. A word like crunk or riz might not stay in the public vernacular, but a lot of words that we use now started out made up as slang at one time, you know? So I think the context of mistake might just mean new. It's just new. It's wrong, but it sounds right. So do it.
Yeah, he's a good point. Major 6 used to be dissonant, right? Because you got a 6 on top of a 5, because you have the 5 naturally in the chord. You add that 6 on top of it. It should be unnatural. Mark, you're talking about the flat third going up to the major third, correct?
Mm-hmm.
The blue note, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever mathematically. But it's the thing that makes it interesting.
I think I'm talking about the 4 to the 5, but yeah,
sure.
Whatever.
Nerds.
And you know, like, just before we get into this next part, one of the biggest moments of probably my entire musical growth, at least at being a stage musician, and I wish somebody would have said it to me a lot earlier, was I remember at one point I was playing a guitar solo, Mark, and I was looking at you, and you looked over, and we were on stage, and you looked over at me and you said, "Why are you looking at me?"
Oh, sorry.
And I was like, holy shit, you're right. And then I turned around and faced the audience. But I mean, like, there have been so many just like really, really great moments about how, and even then, you know, like I look at, you know, even early like YouTube performances and stuff like that, where like if Bono moved up, everybody else moved back. If Bono moved back, everybody else moved up, you know, and it was like there is this art to stage presence. There's this art to making a Friday night at a venue an event that people talk about.
I want to just say I'm sorry that if it came across that way, I probably should have said it better than that. But what I do want to say is one thing I learned, like, because we do a lot of like impressionists, like painterly live improvisations, even though sometimes we're on the click. But one thing that I learned, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, I would always call the band off mic. And it was such a pain in the ass because I would like be telling the band, you know, we're going to go up. I'd be like, get off mic. I'd be like telling everybody to go up a step, or like, you know, like we had all these weird codes of like, we're going to like do 4 hits. And when I do this, and then one day I realized like, it's actually more fun to the audience if you call the band into the mic, and it's way easier. So now I'm just like, I just make all the calls straight into the mic. I'm like, do it again. Bring me up to the A. Hit me 5 times. Like
that's like James Brown's lyrics right there.
Yeah. Yes. And it's like, you don't think about it. You don't think about it when you're with your band, because you think, oh, it's got to look like we rehearsed this, and it's got to look perfect. But the audience feels much more, it's more magical to the audience when they hear the James Brown stuff. Should I hit it and quit? Should I hit it and quit? They love it, because then everyone's experiencing this magic together.
Yeah.
That's no,
that's part of the energy. But by the way, I also, when I was playing live, like the number someone had to have like a sit down with me and be like, you need to like smile. Just like, you know, like nobody, like, you know, I was like focused on getting my parts right, and I was also drunk. So focusing on not falling over. And it was just like, you need, people are there. You're there. If you're having a good time, like they'll have a good time.
It's so true.
That's what separates a good live band from just like a band. And
when I learned that most was, I was in a cover band, and we would play these real dives. It was in the mid 2000s. We were playing this dive, and the stage was maybe this tall. And I was doing something effeminate, right? But on stage, and it was like just in a Bowie, Elton John, not anything. It was fine. It was just effeminate. But in this tiny town that we were in, the patriarchy had too much power, and somebody wanted to fight me. And so this guy runs up to the stage, and he's starting to try to fight me, like actually start a fight with me as I'm singing the song. And the audience backs up and they watch him like they're gonna want to fight. And the bassist was this guy Peach, steps in between us. He steps in between us, and when he does that, I fucking see the audience step in between us. And that clicked my brain, and I realized, holy shit, whatever you do, the audience does. So if you want your audience to be confused, lose your shit on the mic in between songs and be confused, and they're going to hate you. But if you just are that little ballerina who stubs her toe and nobody notices, and she just keeps smiling, they have the best time. If you laugh, they laugh. If you're intense, it's crazy.
When I started getting into, so that I was like, what do I do? Like, just literally pick a person in the audience or a place and just like look at it, smile, doesn't matter, like just look at it, smile every once in a while, like when you're like having a good time, and like everything will flow from there. And that was true. And then I started realizing that you're their entertainment. You're like, your art doesn't matter because they just want to have a good time. And that's why I started getting into, that's about the same time I started getting into Kiss. Because I was like, I watched live performances of theirs, and every fucking show was just like I mean, it's hard to do. It's like every show is a party. Like every show is just Paul Stanley looking out to the crowd, being like, you know, and like, you know, that kind of like, you know, just adjusting his wig. You know, but yeah, and that makes such a difference. By the way, this is a total aside. So, you know, Kiss, a band exclusively of New York Jews. So, and that comes out every once in a while. There's a great video floating online where of a Kiss concert where it's outdoors, and this someone is shining like a laser pointer at the stage, and like on a dime, Paul Stanley, he's just like, he stops and he's like, "Who's that? Who's that with the laser pointer? Who, you? Hey, schmuck, get over here!" It's like this full New York, full New York Jew, and then like they boot him out of the show, and like flips the switch right back on, and it's like it's stage, it's an act, it's all an act. You just have to, you're playing a role on a stage for people to have a good time, and you got to connect by even like just like the smallest thing. Just a smile is going to get people going. The shoegaze thing is cool, but like a really good live band is gonna, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people like shoegaze, and a lot of people like, I think that you're right. If you have to manifest the vision of whatever it is that an artist is making, if you dance, the audience will dance. If you're making mopey, sad music and the audience wants that, I think it's totally fine. I can't imagine Slow Dive working or My Bloody Valentine working if they yelled something, "Are you ready to party?" You know, but
my shoegaze band uses clips of Paul Stanley's stage banter between songs, and we don't talk.
Nice.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that.
It's true.
Do you actually? That's true.
That's funny.
That is true. That's how we do our live shows. We don't do any audience interaction, really. Just like little here and there, and we just let Paul do everything.
I'm driving right now to Kansas to see this.
That's such a good concept.
Yeah.
We've been doing it for years.
We're not going to do it better than him.
It's fair. It's fair. You know, like just take the back seat where you got it, right?
Yeah, fuck it.
So yeah, Mark, you've done all of this music stuff. You're incredibly prolific. I find myself constantly having to learn new songs, and that's just the stuff I know about. There's, you know, we talked about your commercial work. There's a whole bunch of stuff I don't know about. But then you also found the time to write a book called The Happiness Playlist.
Yeah.
And that is a really great, uplifting book. you went on a book tour, you did that thing. I have heard rumors that you might be doing another at some point.
Yeah, I have that done. That second book's done.
Jesus.
So
but then the other thing that is really interesting, and it's a part of just having been a person who's been in a van with you, you know a lot about music. Like, you know a lot about, I hate this phrase, but how the sausage is made. You know a lot about stories of music history. And so at one point, probably during the pandemic, you decided to start a TikTok account where you talk about music history. And you have a shitload of followers because it's, including me, because it's always something interesting. And I thought it would be really, really cool here in the last 15, 20, if you could just share some of the craziest stories about the music that we love that you have uncovered over the years of doing your research.
I appreciate you saying all those things. That's very nice. I think that I've always just wanted to do see how music. There was, when I was younger, I met with this guy, you do these informational interviews, and I met with this guy in an ad agency, a music ad agency. And I've done that for a long time as well. And he said, don't ever do music for your job, because then you'll hate music. And I didn't believe it when he said it, and I still don't believe it. I want to know and eat and live and breathe all types of music. And I remember one time I was doing this thing for Kmart, and they needed, it was in 2010, and they needed a bunch of this type of music for fashion. And this was around the time when that Bauer song, the Harlem Shake came out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was trap music, right? It was the very, very beginning of trap music reaching the vernacular critical mass, vernacular of critical mass. And so they send me this track. They're like, can you make music like this? And I'm like, okay, this is called trap music. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, this is a music style of music called trap music. And now obviously it's one of the dominant forms of music. And I was just like, man, I want to learn everything about this. I want to just know it. I just get off on it. Like I just, and then like, another client, Wolf Ovens, I had to write for like 2 years. I was writing these fake Brandenburg concertos for Wolf Ovens. So I learned all about the Brandenburg concertos and chamber music. And I think how you end up just doing a bunch of random stuff is to be open to it, to recognize that there's a 0.01% chance that you're going to be a rock star and famous. So don't even pursue it, and just find the beauty and joy in when I'm on stage and I'm standing on stage with the band, I'm present there and I'm thinking, wow, when Lady Gaga's on stage, she's occupying 2 or 3 square feet, just like me. That's all that really matters, is the music. Once you lose connection with music and your ego gets in, you don't have a fun life. So every time someone says, oh, you do all these creative things, I always say it's selfish. I just want to have fun. I'm having the most fun. And with TikTok, I think one thing I learned the most is how smart everyone is. What we've fallen victim to in this culture is marketing companies and marketing agencies. And I know because I've worked in advertising, they make the mistake of thinking that everyone is dumb and everyone is smarter than you. And on TikTok, there's this one guy who I just saw a comment of him today. He will not let up on this Deftones post that I did. That I said Deftones is a metal band.
Sure.
And he will not let up. He argues, I admire his tenacity. The Deftones is not a metal band. It's not a metal band. And then everyone comes back and they're like, it is a metal band. I do think genre destroys kind of us, but we need it also. I love the fact that Robert Smith one time said The Cure is not a goth band, because I think what he meant is that they're also a rock band and that they're also a pop band and then they're also this other weird, like super happy thing.
Yeah.
And I think the Deftones is like also, different types of things. But aside from guys like him and women like him and non-binary people like them, you you, you run into these people where I did a story about Tank Girl a couple days ago, and there were all there's like it's like there are all these comments, people talking about Tank Girl, and then someone pops in and said, "Oh yeah, my mom was one of the models for the OG Tank Girl comic," and you're like, "What?" Or you'll do something about some Sex Pistols show, and someone will be like, "Oh, I was there, I was at that show."
Wild.
And I think one thing that is cool is you can just reach these people, and so I try to do the TikTok with that in mind, always that, like, Mark, like, don't ever be the authority on this, because there's somebody out there who knows so much more than you that'll school you and put you in your place. There's this woman named Ann Steele, and I don't know if you ever heard of the Ann Steele album, but it is an astounding piece of electronica from it's Italo disco, basically from the early 80s. Have any of you guys ever heard of the Ann Steele album?
No, not at all.
You wouldn't have. This composer, this Italian composer, wanted to make an electro record. I guess it wasn't called electro then. I don't know what it was called in the late 70s. He hired this model, and they made this kind of Warholian record. It is so incredibly good. And it's she's singing about shopping. She's singing about how she wants to be a billboard, and it's super. It's very major key in a kind of a dystopian way, and I love this record. I just love it. It's one of my favorite records, and that's all they made is this one thing. It's super conceptual. I did a post about it. It went a little popular for that time period. In TikTok, which was like 3 years ago, that what we call like the Wild West days or whatever. And Ann Steele's daughter reached out to me and was like, and I was able to like tell her, wow, I just love your mother's music, and it was, and she, so you just meet. You're always, that I remember Larry T reached out to me. I did a piece on Electro Clash. I did a piece on JJ Fad, and they reached out. So it's cool. But
Yeah,
you were asking some weird stories, and I do have some that
I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear it.
One thing that I really love is, do you guys know Call of Cthulhu by Metallica?
Yes.
Hell yeah.
We all know it, right?
Got a bunch of long hairs in here. Yeah, we know it.
So everybody knows it's spelled wrong, right?
Right.
Spelled. It's supposed to be Cthulu, I think. And it's not even, I guess you're supposed to say Kolulu or Kalalu. Does anybody know the real pronunciation of that?
I would say Cthulhu.
Okay.
No, that's
something
wrong.
That's weird, right? Because it's supposed to be weird because it's monsters. And so Lars, of course, is the one that's reading Lovecraft. Have you guys ever seen A Year and a Half in the Life of Metallica?
No, I've just seen
it. Is so good. It
really?
is. It puts. Okay, there's a scene in Some Kind of Monster where James is running around in a wetsuit on a stage during the Black Album. It's one shot. Do you remember this shot?
No.
I saw that and I'm like, that's the documentary I want to see. I don't want to see Some Kind of Monster. I want to see that. And I found it, and it's so good. It is a supplementary DVD that came with the Black Album. And it's just probably an intern from the label with a video camera in the studio with Bob Rock and Metallica. It's sort of like that Get Back documentary, only it's an hour and a half long. And that's all it is. And you see Bob Rock kind of muscling Kirk Hammett into a solo. And you see how badly they treated Jason. And you just see it. And it's like you could have never made this with money. It's just a video camera floating around. It's like a found footage movie about Metallica. It's so good. And in that movie, you see they're just boys. They're just boys who wanted to start a band. I mean, you're talking about Lars, who didn't even know his instrument before. He's just like, well, I'll do drums. He just wanted to play music. And so it's so typified in this story. Lars is reading call of Cthulhu, and he's really scared. And he's like, we should write, I think he gives it to the other guys and they read it. I'm not totally positive about it, but what I wanted to find out for a TikTok was, why is it spelled wrong? If Lars loved Lovecraft so much and was reading the book, he clearly knew how to spell it. and since he's a younger guy and he's like boyish, he's like really excited about these monsters. And the reason it's spelled wrong, and please look it up and tell me if I'm wrong, because information is weird out there. The reason it's spelled wrong is because in the book it says, the more you say his name, the closer he comes.
No
Cthulhu.
way.
And Lars felt that if they spelled the name wrong, then Cthulhu wouldn't come for the band.
Oh my God. He did it in deference to the story itself.
Yeah,
My
he's
God.
just a kid who believes like, well, maybe this monster's real and is going to come from Metallica. But we all know that he's coming for Megadeth if he's coming for anybody.
That's amazing.
It's funny, right?
I didn't know anything about that documentary. We actually did a show on documentaries, music documentaries, a couple weeks ago, and now I'm going to add that to my list of some stuff that I learned from.
It's
that
two
one.
parts, and it's on YouTube. The first part is just making that record, and then the second part is touring with GNR. And then there's some some flashy interviews that are well lit, and you got to kind of go through those. And sometimes the videos come in. I mean, it was just made. It wasn't made for the public. It was just made for ultra Metallica fans.
Yeah,
so good.
That is amazing.
Yeah, I'm gonna check that one out.
It's on YouTube. Yeah, part 1 is awesome.
It's got to be better than the G.G. Allen documentary.
Man, it's funny. I want to tell another story, but I do have to say, I one night I was thinking, like, what is the most punk band? What is the most punk band? And I kind of was like, I think it's Fugazi. I think it's Fugazi, because they have the sound, they have the history, and they also have the ethic, just white lights on stage, $5 shows, and recording all the records. I really felt like they they combined sound and DIY ethic. And there is this other side of punk that is at odds with it, which is like fashion punk, like Sex Pistols and stuff, which is cool too, right? And then but I felt like the most punk thing might be a little later, because it had time to really define itself, where the Germs was maybe no wave, only they dressed punk. And they're also like homophobic and racist and all these things that are not cool. And Fugazi wasn't any of that. But in the comment section, everyone's entitled their own opinion, and I didn't reply, but in the comment section of that video, it did pretty well. I had to take it down after the Universal takedown happened. I took down 200 videos, but it was interesting to hear people say G.G. Allen is the most punk. And I'm like, wow, there is nothing punk about G.G. Allen, not in the fashion punk way and not in the DIY punk way. It is thrash metal, and it's hateful, just hate mongering, bratty. And I just can't think of anything. I think the Murder Junkies is kind of a cool idea, but
I think early GG before the Murder Junkies was pretty punk. His early stuff, like with the Jabbers, but that's not what anybody's talking about when they say
no. The thing is, here's the thing is, we live in a world where people think Sid Vicious was the singer of the Sex Pistols. I mean, that's how far removed people are from punk. Maybe not since the Pistols documentary came out, or what are you going to call that? The HBO show. But I think like it does kind of show like the naivete towards this very sophisticated genre that comes from blue collar roots and has a lot of, but you can't really commodify punk ideologies. Once you do that, it goes against the ethic of
That's what I was going to say. Wouldn't the most punk band be one that never sold a record? So we wouldn't.
I think you're right.
We don't know who they are. Probably whatever local band you saw that never put anything together.
Yeah.
I have a really good story about that, and I think I'm going to say that. I was going to tell you the story about Pet Sematary by the Ramones, but I think this is cooler. In 1990, I had a punk band, and I won't say the name, but it was me, and I can't even say who was in it, but one of the other people in the band is a full-time musician as well. we were on a bill with 8 bands, and it was a fireman's festival, and the last band was Green Day, and it was before Kerplunk, so they were just last because they were from California, and there was some buzz about them, right? And it was in Waterford, Wisconsin, at a fireman's festival, and we were the third to last band. And then there was a band in between us. And I was really inspired by Decline of the Western Civilization Part 1. I had seen Darby Crash, and aside from, I don't like his misogynist leanings and some of the things that are tied to his ideologies, but he was a 20-year-old kid. I don't really know. But anyways, I did like the fact that he would scream and fall down and flail on the floor. And I was doing a lot of that. It was crazy. Then we were done. And then this band came on. And while the 7th band came on before the 8th band, which was Green Day, these punk kids attacked a Ham's Beer Bear that were at this festival. It was a big 50 or 25-foot inflatable Ham's Beer Bear. And they attacked it with knives, and it came deflating down. And the firemen that were running the festival kicked everybody out. They're like, everybody, we got to go right now. This is done. You guys ruined the Ham's Beer Bear. And there's this band called Demise. And, with punk bands, you're like your first name and then whatever band you're in. And there was this guy named Dwayne Demise. And they were a hardcore band and, popular in Milwaukee at the time. He gets on the mic as everyone's leaving, and he starts this sort of diatribe. And he says, "What you guys did out there to that bear, is that punk? Is that punk?" And I went, "What?" And I still don't know the answer to this day, because it was kids with knives attacking a bear, and it deflated. That is pretty punk. But it ruined the fireman's festival that we had put together and we put flyers for, and Green Day came into town, and the story gets even cooler after that. But I think about that when I think about punk, because it's kind of two genres that have one name, sort of like emo is. You have Midwest emo, and then you have 2000s emo. It's two genres with one name. What happened after that was even more punk. And I really think it attributes to why Green Day got successful. I've been on tour years. I probably toured America 35 times. And I know what happens when you get in a situation like that. You don't have to play. So they were kicked out of the Fireman's Festival. They didn't get to play. We were all kids. I might have been 20. This girl says, "You guys can play in my apartment." And Green Day was like, "Yeah, we want to play." And this girl's like, "Okay, I live above this business." I don't want to say it was a Planned Parenthood. It was some kind of medical thing. And Green Day played in the corner. They set up and they played in the corner for a few people. It wasn't a festival. They just wanted to play music. And I think that's really probably at some point in Green Day's career where there was a decision that they probably had to make that was like that. It was like a 51 to 49% difference. And they were just like, yeah, let's keep going, But that really stuck with me. I think that was a really beautiful moment where you could tell that this band just wants to play. That's all. It's not about their ego. It's not about looking cool. It's not about partying. They were just guys in the back of a van. I remember during the stage, during my show, I ran off stage and I would do this thing where I'd run around the outside of the venue, and I ran outside and I looked in the van, and Green Day was just dudes in a van reading. One guy was reading a book.
Dude, they're still like that. I saw Billy Joe not too long ago. He used to own the Oakland Guitars out there, and he still just like hangs out on the street, and he's just like a normal dude, and people are like, "Hey, that's a Green Day guy," and it's like, "Oh, yep, all right," and then you just go on your way. He just reading a book on the side of the road in his van.
I think that's what you can sit there and try and find a formula to what's going to make you a star, or you can sit around and but I really think that like people who just live music, it just draws others to them, and it's just like I think if you want to be a star, or if you want fame, people can see through that pretty quick. I think it'll get you far, but not all the way. Whatever all the way means. I don't really believe that fame will heal you or make you happy. but I've only tasted a small amount.
Yeah. Well, you guys, we just hit the hour. That was insane. Mark, I love you. I'll see
Love
you
you too.
I'll see you in a couple weeks, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We got some gigs coming up.
Yep. Mark and Sean. Sorry you guys
Dylan-
didn't get to talk. I hope I didn't talk over you guys too much.
they
No,
got
you're
lasers.
you're totally
They got lasers.
fine,
They're
Mark.
fine.
That was really cool. It's great to listen to, man.
Yeah. So thank you
Awesome.
guys all for this.
Eddie, Charles, thank you.
Yeah, it was fun, man.
It was really, really
Definitely-
fun.
If
For the hearts.
if you haven't yet, check out Mr. Mallman on TikTok. Check out his records on Spotify. I'm on some of them.
Yeah, you are.
So
So skip those.
yeah, skip the go with the early stuff. But thank you all. We will see. Oh, who do we have next week, guys? Do we even know?
Yeah, we do.
Who
That's,
do we
What
have?
else we know?
Holy
Marty.
shit. We have the Marty Schwartz next week.
No shit.
that'll be
Marty
fun.
Schwartz is on next week.
The Marty
Nice.
Schwartz. All right. So that'll be
Don't
good.
miss
But
that.
thank y'all. I will see y'all next week.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Bye.
Oh, hold on. There.